My name is Scout Mitchell, and I'm the Vice Moderator here at First Congregational Church in Bellingham for the next 2 weeks, and then I will ascend to the coveted position of Moderator. As you may know, our church is governed by our congregation, which means that we are all ministers of this church. In our church council meeting on Wednesday night, we began with a field trip. We walked from our meeting room downstairs over to the ground floor, where we stood in a circle in the space that this congregation has created through pledges and gifts, a new reality from a dream that has been many years in the making. One member of the circle started singing, "Amen," and we all joined in, clapping and singing and celebrating the ministry of this church that had brought us to that moment. And then we returned to that downstairs room and continued our council meeting, where we wrestled for over 2 hours with another reality, the reality of a campaign to fund our operating budget that doesn't meet the needs of all the other ministries of this church. We talked, we listened, we prayed for understanding. And finally, we came to the bottom line. When your revenue doesn't meet your expenses, you either have to increase the revenue or cut the expenses. Our job was to figure out how to cut the expenses. The ministry funding team gave us a proposal, and we discussed it at length. And then we moved on to the motions. The first was to accept the funding plan proposed by the ministry funding team. This plan would mean cuts to our staffing that could include COLAs, reductions in hours or staff, and cutting a planned wage increase to make one of our positions more fair and equitable. It would also require cuts to our contribution to our church's wider mission, which helps to fund the denomination that leads us in the fight for social justice and so offers support to us in many ways. And although you never think of it until you get a leak in your roof, it would require cuts in our fund to cover major maintenance to our building. That was our worst case scenario. Next, we had to figure out what we would do should additional money come in. Our first priority was how we honor the people who do the work of this church. Every new pledge or increase in pledges that comes in after this budget projection will go toward personnel until we achieve the funding goal of almost $40,000. The next $40,000 of revenue will be split in proportion with the funding between OCWM and the Major Maintenance Fund. And after that, there's a gap between what we would like to do with our ministries and what we can do. Take, for example, our welcoming ministry. One of my favorite times on Sunday in this church is the coffee hour. It's a chance for us to connect with others, and food just makes it better. But that ministry is underfunded, and while the teams are reimbursed for some of the food, the rest is a gift to all of us from the serving team. That's only a tiny portion of our budget, but it's one of the ways that we get a chance to live out welcoming all. And it would be wonderful if we could all share in the funding of that ministry and all the other ministries that help us grow and to sustain that growth. Fully funding our budget is the best case scenario. So, what can we do? There are only 2 ways to increase revenue at this point. If you have not yet pledged, please do. You may be thinking that you plan on giving to the church this year, but haven't committed to an amount. If you could make that commitment, we could count on it in our funding plan. If you have already pledged, please consider increasing your pledge. We know that for some of you, you will hear this request and think, we've given as much as we can. We understand, and we thank you for already digging deep. But you may hear this message, reflect on it, and be able to find a way to increase your pledged amount. If you have any questions about this, you can ask any of the council members who were there for the meeting on Wednesday. I've been a member of this congregation for almost 30 years. In that time, we've had times when the leadership knew by this time that our funding was secure for the next year, and times when we've had to come back and ask for more support to be able to offer a balanced budget at the annual congregational meeting in January. Every time, this congregation has stepped up and figured out a way to make it work. At our council meeting on Wednesday, that same thought was echoed by everyone there. We are the church, and we can make this happen.